What did Steve Sarkisian have to say about the Longhorns' portal plans for the spring window that opens next week? We've got the sound next on Locked On Longhorns. Intro!
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. You were locked on to the Texas Longhorns. I'm your host, BK Brad Kellner, Texas grad, Austin native, and longtime sports radio host here in the Lone Star State. Thank you for making Locked On Longhorns a part of your day every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and tell your Longhorn friends about Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Steve Sarkisian met with the media today following the Longhorns' 7th practice of the spring, and he talked about a number of different things, from Arch Manning to the new look offensive line to how the early enrollee freshmen are doing. We'll have plenty of sound throughout the course of the week right here on Locked On Longhorns. But I want to start with Sark's thoughts on the transfer portal. Of course, the portal opens up again 1 week from tomorrow, and a lot of Texas fans, myself included, are hopeful that the Horns are pretty active when it does. Texas only brought in 5 players in the early portal window, nobody on offense, and the portal class currently ranks 59th in the country. A year after the Longhorns brought in a top 5 portal class that obviously helped them make it to an SEC championship game and make it all the way to the college football playoff semifinal. So a bit of an underwhelming start to the portal class, but obviously the spring window opens up next week and a chance for Texas to add more. We've got a couple of cuts from Steve Sarkisian today. We will start with this one. Sark was asked about the Horns' portal plans next week. Here's what he had to say.
Well, we're always going to evaluate the portal, and as you know, for those that know, I mean, we really try to identify the portal to where we think there's a need, but yet also is the person we're bringing in an upgrade to maybe what we have, or can it supplement what we have at certain positions? Naturally, there's a couple positions depth-wise we're not where we need to be right now, so we'll look at the portal that way. Our numbers are down at receiver right now. From a scholarship standpoint, our numbers are down on the defensive line from where our numbers really should be, and our numbers really down at tight end. And so it's not a secret that we'll look to the portal. But I don't want to take a guy just for a number. I want to take, if you're going to go in the portal, can he help that room play at even a higher level? And so we'll have to assess it. It's free agency, I like to say, but they have to opt into free agency. And so it's not like you can just say, hey, we need a defensive tackle, let's go get a really good one. If they're available, sure, we'll try to, but that doesn't mean that caliber of player will be available.
That's the perfect answer from Steve Sarkisian, right? And that's what I wanted to hear. Look, he didn't explicitly say Texas was going to bring in a wide receiver, a tight end, and a defensive lineman, but he indicated the Longhorns being a little bit short-staffed at all 3 of those positions. And he also said, look, we're not just going to bring players for the sake of bringing in players. We're past that, right? I mean, when Steve Sarkisian took over, and you can go back to the end of the Tom Herman era as well, Texas just needed bodies, right? They needed to take chances on guys who could potentially help them win. But now that this Texas football program is where it is, back-to-back years in the college football playoff semifinals, like, they need difference makers. They don't just need players. They need to bring in guys who can actually help this team take the next step. And even though the Longhorns are losing a ton of players to the NFL draft here in a couple of weeks, like, there shouldn't be a big step back that this team takes in 2025. So don't just go bring in players for the sake of bringing in players, because then you're taking away reps from some of your young guys who might actually be good. No, go out and get a guy like A.D. Mitchell, who was a part of 2 national championship teams at Georgia. Like, you already knew what he was as a college football player because he had some skins on the wall at another high major program. Go out and get a guy like Matthew Golden or Isaiah Bond or Silas Bolden, who had already played college football for multiple seasons, and you kind of knew what they were at this level. Don't just bring in some Joe Schmo here, again, for the sake of just adding bodies. You're at the point now where you should be looking for difference makers. And I'm glad that Steve Sarkisian kind of hinted to that. So let's sort of dive into that answer. Again, the three positions that Sark honed in on, wide receiver, tight end, and defensive line, those are three hugely important positions in the world of college football in 2025. We'll start with the defensive line. Look, Texas has already brought in 3 defensive tackles in this portal class, with Cole Brevard coming in from Purdue, with Travis Shaw coming in from North Carolina, and with Hero Kanu coming in from Ohio State. We'll let you hear from Steve Sarkisian talking more specifically about those guys a little bit later in today's episode. You've already tried, and you've already succeeded in bringing in some bodies there, but you need more. And for me, the quarterback position is the most important position in football. But the offensive and defensive lines, that's right there at number 2, a tie for second place. You've got no shot to win in this sport, especially in this conference, if you can't get pressure on the opposing quarterback. And I think Texas is great on the edge right now, but they still need some bodies throughout the entirety of that defensive line. You think about the impact Andre Sweat and Byron Murphy had 2 years ago. You think about what Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins and Bill Norton and Tia Savea did for this team last year. Texas doesn't get to where it got without the great defensive line play. And of course, that's not just pressuring the quarterback. That obviously goes with stopping the run as well. The Horns have had one of the best run defenses in America in each of the last 2 seasons, in large part because of what they were able to get from their defensive line. You know, you look at Georgia, you look at Alabama with what they were able to do during Nick Saban's dynastic run. Hell, look at Ohio State last year. I know it's a different conference, but that's obviously the team that just won it all. And that's a team you're going to have to beat this season to open up the season. Those defensive lines were all elite. They were littered with NFL talent up front on defense. Texas needs to have that. I love what Justice Terry is. I love what he's going to be. 5-star recruit, one of the top 10 players in the country. Excited about what Alex January might become. Excited about what Melvin Hills might become. But again, you don't want to take some big step back this year. And that means your defensive line can't take some big step back this year. So if there's somebody else that you can bring in, even if he's not like a huge difference maker, but just somebody with some college experience who can fit into that D-line rotation, that would help a lot. Then you go to the offensive side of the ball. We talked about this last week. Look, I don't quite understand why Texas didn't go out and get a portal receiver the first time around. They went after a couple of guys, Eric Singleton, the Georgia Tech transfer who ended up at Auburn, Zach Branch, the USC transfer who ended up at Georgia. Texas went after a couple of receivers, but obviously they didn't go after them hard enough. And I don't think they went after enough receivers because they didn't bring anybody in. And you look again at the impact that the portal receivers have made here in Austin these last couple of seasons. I was kind of stunned that Texas was so lackadaisical when going after a receiver. You're breaking in a new quarterback. I know how good Arch Manning is supposed to be. I'm pumped to see what he can be. And I believe in Arch Manning, but like you should be doing things to try to make life easy on your first-year starter at quarterback. And one of those things that you could do is bringing in experienced receivers. I think the young guys can be great. There's a lot of 4 and 5 stars in that wide receiver room, but outside of DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo, you've got 0 career college production from those receivers. So go out and get somebody. Like, that's a need right now. That's not just a want. That is a need for Texas when the portal opens up. And in today's level of football, when teams are throwing the ball more than ever before, you have to have talent on the outside to have a chance. Again, look at what Ohio State just had on its roster this past season. No coincidence that Will Howard was able to play as well as he did, and the Buckeyes were able to play as well as they did offensively. They had elite wide receiver play. I don't think there's anything Texas can do to have that this season, but you can't just trot out Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, and then, Parker Livingston or just a bunch of other freshmen and hope that those guys are ready for the big time. Go out and find somebody who's already done it at this level. I think that's a must. I'm glad Sark alluded to it. Now we'll go see if the right guy is there. And then same thing with tight end. Like, man, tight end. Look, Jeff Banks has done a great job as the tight ends coach and special teams coordinator at Texas. I find it kind of inexcusable that the Texas tight end room is short on scholarship bodies and kind of in the position that it's in. You've got nothing there right now. You have to go get somebody who has done anything in college football. Spencer Shannon and Jordan Washington, who's now hurt and out for the rest of the spring, 0 catches for those guys. And we know how important Gunnar Helm was last year. We know how important JT Sanders was the 2 years prior. Like, you got to have somebody there at tight end to help this offense and to give Arch Manning that middle of the field and red zone threat, that reliable target, a big body target to make life, again, a little bit easier for him. So those are needs. Like, Texas needs at least one receiver. They need at least one tight end, and I think they probably need at least one defensive lineman as well. So Sark said all of those things. I don't mean to criticize Sark too much. He gave the answer that I wanted to hear, but I'm just kind of backing that sentiment. Like, I'm stunned that Texas did not bring in pass catchers the first time around in the portal. Most of the best players are already gone. Now, also, they can't get an SEC player in this late window because if they do, that guy will have to sit out a season, aka next season, due to the portal rules. So you've got to look at the Big Ten, the ACC, or the Big 12 or maybe there's somebody in the G5 ranks, but again, I want somebody with skins on the wall in high major college football. You got to bring in somebody from one of those conferences to help your team in 2025. What say you? Comment below with your thoughts. Do you think Texas needs a receiver, a tight end, a defensive lineman? Do you agree with me? Do you agree with Sark? Your thoughts on the matter. We would love to hear from you. All right, more from the head coach, Steve Sarkisian, talked a little bit about those defensive tackle additions, and he also talked about Trey Moore's position change on defense. We've got the sound for you coming up next right here on Locked On Longhorns. But first, a word for our friends at Game Time. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of the NBA. We've got the playoffs coming up there. That's all fun, but finding seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge. And then I found Game Time. Game Time makes it super easy to score last-minute tickets. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing, you see the total up front with no surprises or hidden fees at checkout. Last-minute deals. You save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy shows, theater, etc., and you can grab those last-minute seats and get that peace of mind. You could see the view from your seat before you buy. They've got their lowest price guarantee, no surprise fees. I mean, you could book with total confidence thanks to our friends at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Longhorns, your team every day. More sound from Steve Sarkisian's Tuesday presser. He was asked about the defensive tackle transfers. Cole Brevard, Travis Shaw, Hero Canoe, How are those guys doing in their first year at Texas? And what about some of the other defensive tackles that were already here?
Yeah, they've been really nice additions for us. I think Cole, you can feel his experience. He's a really stout guy inside. He's played a lot of football. I think Travis. We're kind of monitoring him. I don't want to overdo it. He's had a knee that has lingered throughout his career some, so we're working him in. And Hero's been a great addition. So I think those three guys have been really nice additions for us, along with the young players that have been in there. So a lot of new faces to go along with the growth of an Alex January and a Melvin Hill. So a lot of new faces in there. Coach Baker's done a really nice job of kind of integrating them all, with some guys moving on and what that looks like. And so, but again, they're like the rest of the team. They're not a finished product yet, and there's some schematic things that some of the new transfers are learning. For the younger players, there's fundamentals, there's technique and scheme going on. So again, we're definitely fighting for more consistency across the board up front. But you see the flashes of what I think we can be down the road.
Yeah, I am a believer in these transfers, and I believe that those guys are going to assimilate very, very well within that locker room. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I believe in Kenny Baker, who did a great job in his first year as the Texas defensive line coach, right? I think we all freaked out a little bit when Bo Davis left Texas for the LSU job last offseason. Now, Bo Davis already left LSU after just 1 year. He's off in the NFL now with the Saints. But I freaked out because Bo Davis is one of the best defensive line coaches in the country. And again, we know how good T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy were 2 years ago. You're losing those guys. You're losing an elite defensive line coach. What is that room going to look like? And then Kenny Baker, who is this? The assistant defensive line coach for the Miami Dolphins, a guy with very little college football experience and none of it in a big conference. Who's this Dwight Schrute guy that we're bringing in here? Kenny Baker did an amazing job. He got the most out of Alfred Collins when Bo Davis really couldn't. He got the most out of Vernon Broughton last season. And again, the defensive line did not take really any step back despite losing 2 top 40 picks to the NFL draft following the 2023 season. So, look, I don't know if Cole Brevard or Travis Shaw or Hero Kanu are as good as Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton were, but those guys have played a lot of college football. Brevard more than 400 snaps in each of the last 2 years in the Big Ten at Purdue. And Travis Shaw, a former very, very highly touted recruit coming out of high school, played more than 300 snaps this past season at North Carolina. There's some talent there. I trust the coaching with Kenny Baker and Pete Kwiatkowski, obviously, as well. And I think Texas is going to get the most out of those guys. And then eventually Alex January, who, well, I shouldn't say eventually. I think as of right now, he's going to have to be a big part of Texas's D tackle rotation in 2025. Again, we'll see what they do in the portal. And then Melvin Hills, maybe another year or two down the road. I trust this coaching staff. I like that Texas went out and got some bodies with some experience. I think they could use maybe 1 or 2 more. But love what I'm hearing from Steve Sarkisian. Don't love the Travis Shaw knee issue. I actually talked to a Carolina person last week about Travis Shaw. Again, a very highly touted recruit from the state of North Carolina who stayed home. Supreme talent, just wasn't always engaged and mentally just wasn't always where he needed to be. If Texas could keep this guy, number 1, on the field, get that knee issue cleaned up, and number 2, just locked in, then this could be one of the steals of the portal for the Longhorns because the talent is absolutely there. And we saw flashes of that at North Carolina, but maybe moving away from home will help out a little bit. Can Travis Shaw put it all together? Again, I trust Kenny Baker to do just that. All right, one more from Steve Sarkisian on today's show. Again, we'll have more sound the rest of the week. Here's Sark talking about Trey Moore. Again, a lot of reports about a position change from Trey Moore, who played off the edge almost exclusively last season. Apparently, he's been lining up more in the middle of the Texas defense in an off-ball linebacker role. Here's Sark with the latest on the former UTSA transfer.
He causes some problems even for our offense right now because he's playing about 3 different positions. And so it's not like it's allowing the defense to do some different things and giving them a lot of flexibility. And we all know this flexibility of Anthony Hill, of what that looks like. And so identification issues for sure. But again, Trey, this has been a learning curve for him this spring, and we all know he can rush the passer off the edge and do that stuff. But playing off the ball more, something that he hadn't done in his past, he's having to work every day. And I'm not talking just at practice. It's coming up, meeting with Coach Nansen. It's pre-practice, it's post-practice to find that level of comfort. The good thing about Trey is he's a worker, he this level of discipline to his approach of how he goes about his business is allowing him to kind of get more comfortable quicker. But again, he's not a finished product there either, and that's a good thing. And that's a guy, in his 4th year that's really challenging himself to become the most versatile player that he can be.
Look, I like hearing that. I like that Trey Moore is going above and beyond to meet with Johnny Nansen and to meet with Pete Kwiatkowski just to make sure he's doing what he's supposed to do and make sure he's learning as much as he can with this position change. But I'll be honest, I'm still a little weary about this Trey Moore position change because it took him a while to figure out the edge position last year. He didn't have a sack in the first 8 games of the season, and he only had 3 TFLs in the first 8 games of the season. So he was on the field a lot, getting a lot of snaps, but the production just wasn't quite there for Trey Moore, and people were wondering, is this guy good enough for the SEC? We know he had 14 sacks at UTSA, but obviously this is a totally different beast here at UT, and it's not quite clicking. And then boom, 5.5 sacks, 8 TFLs in the last 7 games of the year. So it clicked for Trey Moore late. When he figured it out, he was awesome, and it made a tremendous difference for this Texas defense. Like, we saw what he could do. I want him to build on that exclusively off the edge. But That's not what's happening here. So I trust in Sark. I trust in PK. I trust in Johnny Nansen. Those guys know a hell of a lot more football than I do. Those guys know what they're doing. But again, it's like you felt like you unlocked something with Trey Moore. Finally, it took you longer than you wanted. You finally got something out of him. Why are you trying to make him learn a new position when it took him half a year to really learn the position he had been playing for years prior? I don't understand it. But hey, if Sark is right, if he's not just blowing smoke up Trey Moore, and he is that versatile and he's making that much of a difference at 3 different spots on this Texas defense, then, well, that's going to be better than just Trey Moore making an impact on one side of the defensive line, right? At one edge position. If he can make the type of impact he made at edge later in the season at a few different spots on the Texas defense this coming season, then again, that's going to make life a lot easier for the other guys on the Longhorns defense. And that will pay dividends for Trey Moore, both in college, but also in the NFL, because it is a contract year for him. Could have left this past season, decided to come back. Maybe part of the decision to come back hinged on getting to play a few more positions on this Texas defense. If it all works out, he could be a very high draft pick in 2026. Hopefully it does work out, because again, I'm a bit skeptical on moving Trey Moore around, taking him away from a very premium position, edge, moving him more to off-ball linebacker, not nearly as premium of a position. You've already got Ant Hill and Leonga Lafau there, and Brad Spence, who you brought in from Arkansas. I don't understand it on its surface, but time will tell. And hopefully it does work. All right, more sound from Sark later in the week. But our final segment, we'll talk a little Texas basketball, maybe the worst kept secret in college basketball. Tre Johnson has made it official. He is headed to the NBA draft. We'll put a bow on his Texas career and talk about where he could end up in the pros next, right here on Locked On Longhorns. But first, a word from our sponsor, TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with TurboTax and a TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today. Tax day is next week. Get it done. TurboTax has an expert who will give your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while giving you real-time updates so you can focus on your day. An expert is going to find you every deduction possible to file every form, every investment, everything, all with 100% accuracy, so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. Again, TurboTax.com. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, back here, Locked On Longhorns, your team every day. It may be the least surprising breaking news of all time, but the breaking news from earlier this afternoon, Texas star Tre Johnson has announced that he is going pro. He joined ESPN's Malika Andrews on the set of NBA Today to make the announcement, saying, quote, "This season was a roller coaster ride, but it was a great experience, wins and losses aside. Going up against the best teams in the country, playing at Texas was the best experience I've ever had, being with a great group of guys and a great coaching staff," end quote. Again, this was no surprise. New Texas coach Sean Miller was actually asked after his introductory press conference a couple of weeks ago what he would say if he got the chance to talk to Tre Johnson about his looming decision. And Sean Miller on the record said, quote, "What I would say to him is that he needs to go declare for the NBA draft. That's the best decision for him and his family," end quote. I'm sure Sean Miller would have taken Tre Johnson back if he shocked the world and said, "Hey, I want to play college basketball for another year." But Sean Miller knew, you knew, I knew, the American people knew, we all knew that Tre Johnson was one and done. Hell, we knew that from the moment he signed with Texas, really the moment he committed to Texas. And obviously with what he was able to do, the most prolific Texas freshman since Kevin Durant, and a guy who led the SEC in scoring in his only year in the conference, in the best year of SEC basketball history. Very impressive. The SEC Freshman of the Year, All SEC second team, All SEC freshman team, end of the year averaging 20 points per game, also 3 rebounds and 3 assists. Shot 43% from the floor, 40% from downtown, 87% from the free throw line. A great year. A little bummed that Texas, got bounced in the first 4 and didn't do more as a team with a supreme talent like Tre Johnson. I'm at least glad he got to play in the tournament. I use air quotes for that because it was a play-in game, but technically it does count. as an NCAA tourney game. He was so great for most of the season. He kept Texas alive in conference play when other guys were dealing with injuries and inconsistent play. And Tre Johnson was great there. He was also great down the stretch, too, to keep Texas in a position to make the dance. I'll never forget his first game as a Longhorn in Vegas against Ohio State, where he scored 29 points, the most for a Texas freshman in his debut, breaking a Kevin Durant record that I honestly thought was never going to get broken. Of course, we all remember the 30-point game he had against A&M and that miracle comeback here in Austin in late January. He had 32 in that huge game against Kentucky, right? Those two wins right there really helped Texas get their ticket punched in the NCAA tournament. The 39 he scored in that overtime loss to Arkansas in Fayetteville. Like, this guy was just an elite scorer. He was an elite scorer at Texas. He was before he got to Texas, and I think he will be in the NBA as well. I'm excited to watch what he can do in the league. And, yeah, that scoring ability, look, not a great defender. Still has to work on his passing a little bit, some of the other aspects of his game, but this game has always been about getting buckets. And Tre Johnson can get you some buckets. And, I think that's going to translate to the next level. ESPN's Jonathan Givony has Tre Johnson going 5th overall to Philadelphia in his latest mock draft that was released earlier today. I saw Bleacher Report has Tre ranked as the 6th overall prospect in this class. So, yeah, Tre's going to be a lottery pick. There's a good chance he's a top 5 pick. If he doesn't go in the top 5, he won't slip out of the top 10. Obviously, the pre-draft process, the combine, the interviews, all that stuff is going to matter for Tre as well. But, man, what this guy was able to do at a place like Texas in the SEC this year, incredibly impressive. And he's the biggest reason why the Horns made it to the dance, and going to miss having him around in Burnt Orange. Even though we knew it was only a 3-month rental, he was fun to watch, man. He was really, really fun to watch. So tip of the cap, Tre. Best of luck at the next level. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for making Locked On Longhorns your listen today, I should say. Definitely check out the Locked On NFL Draft show with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Favorite college players, your favorite Longhorns are getting ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll have more sound from Steve Sarkisian on tomorrow's show. We'll also recap Texas baseball's game against Houston Christian tomorrow as well. Plenty more to talk about. There's always stuff to talk about here on Locked On Longhorns. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, please like, please leave a comment, please subscribe, please rate, please share. Tell your Longhorn friends about Locked On, your team every day. Really appreciate y'all tuning in as always. Until tomorrow, horns up, mic's off. We'll see y'all next time. This is Locked On Longhorns.